So we've got to start somewhere, right? Thankfully, over the past couple of years, the Pokemon Company have started releasing League Battle decks, competitive structure decks that aren't too far off something that you could take to a local tournament like a Challenge or a Cup and do pretty well with. And that is where we will be starting on our sealed only journey with the Ice Rider Calyrex VMAX deck. This is probably one of the better, if not the best, League Battle deck that has been released so far, and makes a perfect start to where we are hoping to end up. For those of you that aren't familiar possibly with the deck, here is the card count. So we've got 3 Ice Rider Calyrex V with a 3 complementing line of V Maxes. This is going to be the main attacker, that Max Lance doing 10 plus 120 damage for each energy, for the 2 energy that are discarded from the Pokemon, and then Rider the High King, 10 plus 30 for each of your opponents benched. That's really the only attacker in this deck so far, which is certainly going to be something that I'm going to be looking to change and upgrade pretty soon. We've got 2 months, thankfully, until the first tournament that we will be going to, the Lille Regionals. So we've got plenty of time yet to crack some packs, figure out whereabouts we want to take the deck. For the rest of the Pokemon, it's just a regular Inteleon draw engine. So we've got 4 Sobble. I think it's 4 Drizzile. It is indeed. So we've got 4 Drizzile with the Shady Dealings. And then a little bit of a different approach for the starter deck, for what this came with. And when I found out, going through the deck, I was actually quite surprised pleasantly. So we've got 2 Shady Dealings Inteleon, but we also have 2 Quick Shooting Inteleon. Now, I think that these Quick Shooting Inteleon might really make a difference. It might really help us out, at least in the early stages of this sealed only journey. Being able to put 2 damage counters whenever. Remember, this isn't just as soon as you place it down onto the Drizzile to evolve like the Shady Dealings Inteleon is. This is just as long as it's around and it's on the playfield in some way, shape, or form. Once per turn, you are able to use that 20 damage. So if you've got both of them out, that's an easy 40 right there, which hopefully should just be able to, if you're attacking towards the active, targeting the active, help that Ice Rider Calyrex VMAX with the Max Lance just get over the line and do the extra little bit of magic number damage that it needs. Going on to the train account, the support account, we're playing 4 copies of Melanie, which makes sense. A lot of water energy is going to be hitting the discard pile with that Ice Rider Calyrex VMAX attack. It makes sense to be able to bring some of them back and get a little bit of draw support while we're doing so as well. The deck comes with 2 Professor's Research. This might be subject to change. It might be something I'll be looking at getting rid of early on as well. I'm just thinking that with how much discarding we're already doing for the Ice Rider Calyrex attacks, it feels like the last thing that I want to do is be drawing or discarding those cards. But the 2 count at the moment seems okay. Double Marnie. This will be a card that is, again, subject to change. I'm not too sure how I feel about Marnie. The hand disruption is fantastic, obviously, but when you've got cards in the format that are coming up like Roxanne and others, maybe that will be one that's gonna be dropped soon. And then finally for the supporters, it's 3 Boss's Orders, pretty standard, pretty simple, and hoping to be pretty useful. 3 Capacious Bucket gets the 2 water energy into the hand. Unfortunately, the problem this starter deck has, there's no way to accelerate those water energies from hand into the attach. It's really just so that you can use them, perhaps maybe if you do want to bring them in for a Juniper, maybe even a card like Quick Ball, which we are playing 4 of. If you want to, if you've got Capacious Bucket, use it, get your 2 water energies, 1 to attach from hand for the turn, the second one to discard away using Quick Ball fodder, possibly even Quick Balling for a Sobble, or setting up a second Ice Rider Calyrex V, and then being able to Melanie as your supporter for turn, taking the second water energy and setting up the max lance attack. We are playing 4 level ball as well, or the deck comes with 4 level ball, just to be able to help try and find either that Sobble on the Drizzile, get that Shady Dealings engine working up nicely. To switch, I don't mind this card. I don't mind the inclusion in this card. And I think this might be something that sticks around for a little bit, purely just so that we can help get those Sobble and Drizzile out of the active in case they get boss's orders up throughout the games. 3 Evolution Incense makes sense. We're playing a fair few Evolution style cards in this deck. We want to be able to get them out quickly. This is probably one of the cards that I'm going to be looking to get rid of quickly. 2 Air Balloon. Considering this deck runs 2 switch, I don't really see the value in attaching Air Balloon to Ice Rider Calyrex VMAX, for example, while it does have that double colourless retreat cost, and then obviously combined with Air Balloon, it's free retreat. I don't necessarily know how useful that's going to be. So this is certainly going to be a card that's going to be on the chopping block pretty early. And then the last trainer cards, I believe, is 4 copies of Path to the Peak. This is something that I'm definitely looking to cut down on straight away. I think Training Court is going to be a card that's going to really, really help the energy recycling in this deck. Playing a 4 Path to the Peak feels a little bit overkill to me, so I think dropping at least one of them, hopefully if we manage to pull a Training Court pretty soon, and then bringing that in as a 3-1 count, or possibly even a 2-2 count, or a 2 countless path, 1 Training Court, and then we've got a slot open to try and figure something else out depending on what we pull. And then the rest of the cards in the deck is all just water energies. It's pretty standard. You don't really need any special energy in this deck as it stands at the moment. We might end up going into a deck like Arceus, which does utilize something like double turbo energy, but at the moment it's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 water energy, which I'm hoping is going to be enough. That's like one of my biggest worries in this deck, is running out of energies too quickly. I suppose while you've only got the main attacker of Ice Rider Calyrex VMAX, that 2 water energy used for the attack and the text as well, you may discard. So it might even be into a situation where we've spread a little bit of damage around. We're using the quick shooting Intellion, for example, and then we might only have to do 130 to get a KO on, say, a random V Pokemon that's just sort of been stranded, or perhaps pinging off some of my opponent's Intellion kind of package. But there's only really one way that you're going to be able to figure that out, and that's going to be with playing the deck. So overall, it's a pretty good little spread, right? You've got some really good staple cards here. You've got cards like Bosses, which are going to be useful throughout really whatever deck we play. Quick Balls, Level Balls probably as well. Evo Incense. Switch maybe not so much, depending on what deck we end up with and we end up trying to build into. The Switch is something that might go by the wayside. Capacious Bucket, again, as well, is one of those kind of situational, well, not necessarily situational, but it depends on kind of what deck we end up going into. If we end up trying to upgrade this something into like Palkia, then Capacious should stick around. If we go towards Arceus, then Capacious will probably make way. I know that the one of the decks that made it into the finals at Worlds was using Memory Capsule. So depending on where we go and depending on what we pull, we'll be able to make those decisions. So overall, it's a pretty solid start. It's a pretty solid deck and a pretty solid product that the Pokemon Company have put together. Depending on where we want to go and depending on how we pull towards the start of the series will definitely dictate what kind of deck we want to build towards. There's a couple of really cool products that are yet to actually release at the time of recording and uploading this first video that will be able to really steer us in one way or another. But until then, we've obviously got our open packs and products before. So hopefully as we start to put some pieces together, we might be able to cut some of those cards that we mentioned. The air balloons are certainly one of the biggest ones that are on the top of my hit list. Perhaps the switches, one or two of the Path to the Peaks, maybe cutting down on the Intellion engine and bringing some other attackers in. I'm certainly looking at doing that as well. But we're only going to be able to understand and figure out what we're going to want to do with time. So hopefully you guys are going to stick with us and see what this deck becomes and what 60 cards we actually end up taking when we go to Lille Regionals in over 2 months' time. So now that we've gone through the deck, let's give you a better idea of what this challenge entails. I am going to be attempting to get my invitation to the 2023 Pokemon World Championships in Yokohama, Japan, with only a deck comprised of cards that have been pulled from sealed product and packs. I'm not allowed to trade any of the cards that I pull to acquire new ones that I might want, and I'm not, of course, allowed to buy singles. So no going and straight away buying Palkia V and V-Stars. I have to pull them. One thing that I do also want to mention, and I want to kind of use as like a diversion or a little bit of a difference in some seal-only series that there have been in the past, pre-releases are on the table. The Lost Origin pre-release at the time of filming this first episode is next week, and that is going to be next episode, is going to be playing through the Lost Origin pre-release, and we'll be able to use the cards that we get in the pre-release later on in decks in the future once Lost Origin obviously becomes standard legal. But it's going to be a real challenge. It's going to be really, really tough. Obviously, we've still got rotation to come in the start of 2023 with the way that the season restarted after COVID. There has been an announcement, there was the announcement that rotation wouldn't happen straight away. So we're still waiting on details of what cards are going to go, what cards are going to stay. But at least for now, we've got 60 cards. We've got 60 cards that we can look towards, we can build towards. The first major test of this deck is going to be Lille Regionals. I won't be able to make the regionals that are held in Spain in just a few weeks. It's just too soon, and I figure that this deck needs a little bit of a chance to find its own feet, to build up to a state where I'm going to be happy to take it to not only to a regional championships, but take it abroad to a regional championships, which is something that I have never ever done before. I certainly think this is possible. I really do think this is possible. We've got a lot of time. We've got a few events at the very least to help try and build towards the presumably 350 point cap and margin that we need to surpass to earn ourselves an invitation to Japan. I want to hear from you guys though down in the comments section. I want to know what you guys are going to think about this challenge first and foremost. Do you think that it's possible? Do you think that it's going to be too difficult? Would this be something that you would ever consider attempting yourself? And if you would, and if you're in my shoes, what kind of products and cards and packs do you think that we should aim for first? I mentioned earlier about Training Court dropping one or two Path to the Peaks if we manage to pull that, and definitely eyeing up, I believe it's Rebel Clash is the set that Training Court was printed up, so I'm certainly eyeing up a little bit of product from that set. Of course, you have Brilliant Stars for Arceus and Astral Radiance for Palkia. There's a lot of different options. There's a lot of different ways we can try and build this deck. Do we actually just scrap the entire water idea entirely and look for a set that's maybe perhaps like Battle Styles and we go towards an Urshifu build? Let me know. Let me know what you would suggest. Let me know what you think. I'd love for you guys to get involved, to be a part of this series as much as I am. And if you have any ideas as well, if you have any ideas for perhaps milestone targets, bounties, any kind of challenges, extra challenges to try and throw the series up a little bit and shake the series up a little bit, let me know. The comment section is right there for you to do so. This is going to be a challenge that's going to take the whole season. It's going to take the whole year. We're going to have a lot of highs, a lot of lows. and hopefully some really, really great pulls along the way. So if you are looking forward to this series and it's something that you want to stick with, then please be sure to hit that big red subscribe button, turn on the bell for notifications so you do not miss a single sealed only Road to Worlds video, and of course a like and sharing this around with anybody that you think might be interested, friends, family, other players at your local scene or your regional scene. I really hope that this is going to become something quite special to see if we can make it to the World Championships, the first time it's ever going to be held in Japan, with a deck that's been purely made from the luck of the draw. Speaking of luck of the draw, though, I think that we need to see Calyrex take its first ride. Let's go to locals. Okay, so first things first, let's go over kind of some overall thoughts about the deck's first outing. You see in the background the video of one of the games that I played. Admittedly, it was quite a small locals. There was only, including myself, a pool of 4 players, and one of which stopped playing pretty early. So I only got the chance to play 2 rounds effectively. But even in those 2 rounds, the deck felt pretty decent. You see me taking a mulligan there, but I think that was the only time that I took one the entire evening. But we'll get into that at a later stage, because that's a point I do want to make. Granted, this wasn't necessarily the most strenuous test of what the deck can and can't do. It was more just for me to have a little bit more of a peek at the combos and the general idea and purpose of the deck, which, when it works and when it does well in its sort of tempo, it is good. The player that I have here against in round 1 was a person of the lower age division, was playing a psychic / metal style deck, which wasn't necessarily a competitive deck, but it was, a deck that I think a lot of us will remember being in the shoes of, making a first deck out of cards that we were lucky enough to pull and get out of booster packs that we'd been gotten one day by our families and such. But as soon as the deck sort of started getting going, it was relatively easy to get the max lances, get the supporter combos, the Melanie combos and things like that. So really that was just kind of a crash test. The second round, however, is the one that I'll talk about more, because a lot more actually kind of happened. It went to 3 games, which I ended up winning 2-1. The first game was really tough. It was really difficult, purely because of how slow the deck was to start. I couldn't find any of the combo pieces to get Melanie. I think the first Melanie I actually got was like turn 3, and my opponent at the time was playing an Arceus Gengar VMAX, which, I mean, anything with an Arceus in it, just as soon as it takes off, it takes off. The deck just raced away, set up. I was left way too far behind, and it was pretty chalked. But then games 2 and 3 were brought back pretty well. It helped that my opponent bricked both times. I think game 2 it was too much energy, and then game 3 it wasn't enough energy. It wasn't any energy. But the deck still felt alright when it was sort of getting going, and I felt like I was put under more pressure, more stress, obviously, when you're dealing with Pokemon like Arceus V-Star and Gengar V-Maxes, and you've got your opponent throwing quick balls and the barrel around that just was in the deck that won Worlds. a couple of things that I kind of noted, and I've just got them written down here on like a notebook, in my little notebook that I'm keeping throughout the series. The quick shooting Inteleon is very good. The quick shooting Inteleon is very, very good. It's something that I'm a big fan of, but I don't know whether I'm necessarily a fan of it to the point where I want the 2 copies. It feels like the 2 copies, and this is something that I kind of hinted at earlier, and I wanted to kind of expand on a little bit, was the fact that there's only one primary attacker in the deck, which is the Calyrex VMAX. The only other Pokemon are the parts of the Inteleon engine, and a large majority of those are evolution Pokemon. So Quick Ball, running 4 Quick Ball, all of a sudden you're Quick Balling half the time for Sobbles that you might not necessarily need. I found myself with a couple of Drizzile in hands towards the late stages of, I think, Game 3, when I wanted to try and just... all I wanted to do was just close the game out. Just get enough energy, get the extra little bit of damage on board, and take the game from there. But when I had a grip full of evolution cards that I didn't need anymore, because my board state was in such a place where I had an Ice Rider VMAX in the active, an Ice Rider VMAX on the bench set up, I had Drizzile and Shady Dealings that was ready to evolve up to an Inteleon, I had 1 quick shooting Inteleon already there, and then I think another Drizzile as well, if memory serves me right. But, like, yeah, I think maybe it might be worth exploring cutting at least 1 part of the Inteleon engine, just because the amount that are in there at the moment just feels a little bit excessive and felt a little bit too much. I also wanted to talk about Air Balloon, because that card, the card that I first said to that I was going to look at trying to get rid of and cut down on, helped save my game too. I had a Calyrex VMAX in the active with about 180, 190 damage on it, and my opponent had a fully loaded and ready to go Gengar VMAX, and if I didn't have Air Balloon, that would have been knocked out. I Air Ballooned to pivot out, bring up a brand new fully fresh VMAX Pokemon, Melanie onto it, and then Max Lance and sort of swing the board state back in my favour. So the Air Balloon really helped, but again, it's that argument of, well, the exact same thing would have happened if you had Switch, which the deck does have 2 of, but I don't know, maybe that just that 1 extra pivot out and pivot slot might be useful in the future. I'm really not too sure. I think that will have to come with more practice and more runs with the deck. Training Court would have really helped in this round as well, in this matchup. I felt like, especially with that game 1 when I couldn't find anything for Melanie, if I could have just used Training Court to grab a water energy from the discard pile to attach on, then be able to use Capacious, for example, to get the second attachments that I could attach from hand and go, that would have bought me a little bit more time, as opposed to just kind of sitting around and not having the chance to really do much, and then the Arceus just completely running wild. So I definitely think Training Court is something that needs to come into this deck, at least as a one-off, just that I've got that extra little energy retrieval option if for some reason, you know, half my Melanies are in the prizes, or I just don't find any Melanies for some reason. Undoubtedly, for the most part, you will, because of the Shady Dealings engine, but that's still a couple of turns that you've got to take, and even then that's pieces. If you don't just naturally draw them, well then you've got to go get for Evolution Incense, then you've got to go search for Quick Ball, there you've got to, you know, you've got to play around a few different aspects and a few different things. So I think Training Court is definitely one of the biggest cards that I'm looking at adding, at least very quickly. Another card that I thought might be helping this deck, or might have helped at least in the situation that I found myself in Game 1, was the Luminion V, that is essentially Tapu Lele GX, put it down to the bench, and grab a supporter, that would have really been able to help me and obviously let me just straight away grab that Melanie and then start accelerating and put a little more pressure back onto my opponent. And then the final for at least the target cards from this outing and from this first test was a second attacker. I think that this deck would help having that second option in case the VMAXs aren't necessarily working, or there's Evo incenses in prize cards or something like that. It just felt that for the most part, if I had those Calyrex VMAXs, which I think I only really ever had 2 out at one time, one in the active, one on the bench, I think having that extra attacker and the extra sort of ace to just go, well, you think this is a Calyrex VMAX deck? Here's where you're wrong. So there's a couple of options that I'm kind of milling around. I think there's a Curium VMAX that's coming out in Lost Origins, so that might be an option. There's another couple of cards that I am looking at possibly thinking to add as backup attackers, but at least for now, we start off the overall record 2-0 with 3 games won and 1 game lost. Next time, we will have the Lost Origin pre-release, so we might actually be able to straight away grab that Curium V and VMAX. But that's going to do it for the beginning of the sealed only journey. I hope that you've enjoyed the episode. If you have, please like, comment, subscribe, turn on the bell for notifications, and share the video around as well. That's going to do it. Thank you so much for tuning in wherever you're watching from, whenever you're watching this. I will catch you later.